Many adjectives and superlatives can be used to describe today's happenings, not just what is unfolding at this instant at the Georgetown Marriott, but overall, I'm speaking about what is taking place within Guyana and around the world, following on the announcement of a significant discovery 200 kilometers offshore Guyana's territorial waters. Those words have been historic, transformational, outstanding, transcendental, stupendous, and exciting, all of which I'm sure spring to your minds now and have been used in the past. For me, I believe that the coming oil production is all these and much more. The 2015 discovery and the economic fortunes it portends for Guyana has to be seen against a backdrop of centuries of the enslavement of Africans, decades of indentureship of East Indian, Chinese, Portuguese, and the displacement of perhaps millions of our first people, the Amerindians. Political independence in 1966, republicanism in 1970, and the socio-political and socio-economic and even geopolitical realities and tensions that followed these events have all combined to present to us in the first quarter of this new millennium the crucible of our time. The history of Guyana, Dutch, French, and British, in a pre- and post-independence era has been one of struggle and antagonism, many of which remain today. Many of these features remain with us today. After all that we have endured, the Guyanese people are owed a better life, and this discovery presents such an opportunity, once, of course, handled delicately and deliberately. 50 years ago, our parents grappled with the anxiety and the reality of what autonomy and independence really meant. Managing an economy, maintaining national security, building social cohesion, and strengthening parliamentary democracy. And today, we, 50 years later, have to grapple with those very complexities, and now with an even bigger challenge. How do we successfully and sustainably manage the resource of petroleum that has been bequeathed to us without imperiling ourselves, our children, our environment, and even our sovereignty? This is why I say that we face the crucible of our time. The Oxford Dictionary describes crucible, and I quote, as a situation in which people or things are severely tested, often interacting to produce something new, end of quote. Elsewhere, philosophers may speak about the dialectics of our time. And so it is against this backdrop that ExxonMobil, with its venture partners Hess and CNOOC, announced to the world that they had made a discovery in our waters. In making this discovery and the formal announcement shortly after, and I pause to say that where the news first broke about this discovery is a story that needs to be told, but certainly not in this setting. Those who know it will laugh. Guyana's destiny as a young state, just 50 years old, was placed on a trajectory that can only be described as extraordinary. Providence perhaps determined that in our 50th year as an independent nation, the gift of a bountiful patrimony would be lifted out of the earth and placed into our hands. And so where we go from here will determine not only the next 50 years, but certainly the next millennia. We require a whole of government, whole of industry, whole of society, and whole of country approach. Partnerships are a sine qua non for success, and these have to be intergovernmental, between government and the operators themselves, between government and civil society, between government and the people of Guyana, and most importantly, between and amongst the people themselves. Certainly, we in government do not claim omnipotence or omniscience. Far be it for us to make such a vaunted claim. We cannot get all that has to get done if we attempt to do it all alone. And so government is seeking partnerships with individuals, with groups, with associations, and even with countries that are prepared to work in the best interest of Guyana and its people. We seek like-minded partners. At the same time, we need to say and to accept that there is a measure to which we can obtain advice and assistance at any given time. So we seek stronger partnerships with the Guyana Oil and Gas Association. with the Private Sector Commission, the African Business Roundtable, the Guyana Manufacturers and Services Association, and the Chambers of Commerce and Industry representatives throughout the 3 counties of Guyana, and with civil society organizations such as the GHRA, the APA, GOIP, ACDA, the Indian Arrival Committee, the National Two-Shores Council, to name just a few. So what have we been doing for the past 20 months since the discovery? We dubbed 2016 as the year for preparation, and we have dubbed 2017 the year for implementation. We have forged partnerships where none existed before with Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, and the new Petroleum Producers Discussion Group, and with the Mexican government's Petroleum Institute. And we have strengthened relationships with the United Nations Development Fund, the World Bank, the Commonwealth Secretariat, and the US Department of State. In particular, the Mexican Petroleum Institute will provide 3 white papers for us to strengthen the framework for a stronger industry and regulation. Additionally, we have retained experts and are at present assessing ExxonMobil's and other operators' applications for both production and exploration licenses, respectively. Further, we are considering a proposal from one of the world's leading offshore companies to establish a world-class base at Crab Island, Berbice, and are examining the possibility of utilizing some of the available natural gas from the Liza field for energy generation as we transition to renewables. Lastly, we are addressing in advance the viability of a refinery or refineries in Guyana. Insofar as policy and legislative initiatives are concerned, we have completed a raft of legislative and policy drafts and updates, and these include the updating of Guyana's national upstream petroleum sector policy, creating a Guyana national local content policy. We have revised our model production share agreements with assistance from international law firms. We have updated the 1986 petroleum exploration and production legislation and accompanying regulations. We have fashioned a draft sovereign wealth fund bill that has all of the features which Ambassador spoke of and are known as the Santiago Principles. We have drafted petroleum taxation and fiscal rules and regulations. We have completed the drafting and consultation process for the establishment of the Petroleum Commission of Guyana and hope to lay that bill in Parliament within a few weeks. And we are working towards establishing a Petroleum Scientific Institute by 2020 and having a national oil company by 2018. Going forward, the Ministerial Subcommittee of Cabinet that comprises the Ministers of Natural Resources, Finance, Public Infrastructure, Agriculture, Business, Communities, Social Protection, Education, Public Telecommunication, and Citizenship will continue to meet to ensure that government, through its ministries and agencies, will bring its entire weight to push at the wheel, and we propose at this same time to engage the industry and civil society organizations to examine the means through which we can create a more inclusive platform for the exchange of views and ideas. There is much planned for this year and going into 2020, the details of which will be shared as we continue to roll out our outreach program, which we have dubbed Guyana Rising from Potential to Prosperity. All that we do has to be bracketed by a set of considerations that remind us to be cautious as we go about our preparations, recalling that there are those with vested interests in seeing us failing as a nation, and within our society, there are as many cynics as there are optimists. We are reminded as well to be inclusive in our decision making and to be decisive and not to lose the initiative that presents itself now, as the opportunities can evaporate as quickly as do vapors of gas. Whatever we do, we must do together. Let me end by offering congratulations to the members of the Guyana Oil and Gas Association, GOGA, for rising to the occasion and not just holding conferences and lectures, but also engaging Exxon and the operators in commercial activities. By celebrating our blessings and by reminding you to be contemplative about what it will take for us to get to the first barrel of oil in a few years' time. and to ensure that the benefits and growth that we expect to follow are economically and environmentally sustained and sustainable, equitably shared, used to develop our beloved Guyana, and safeguarded from threats that threaten our existence from both within and without. The government of Guyana is always open to good and useful suggestions and to meaningful support.
I would like to recognize here the great achievement of the Granger administration to collaborate with Guyanese and international operators and investors alike to create the climate for these advances, while also promoting the principles of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, EITI. The two are not mutually exclusive. My government, moreover, congratulates the Honorable Minister in following through on his commitment to put forward draft legislation soonest on oil and gas, and in a manner that includes all stakeholders. The view from the United States on this exciting and new industry for Guyana remains exactly the same as back in December. The private sector, along with Guyana's government and civil society, will play an integral role and share responsibility for shaping the future of the country. As Guyana continues to develop new industries and the regulatory structure and processes that will govern them, your role as citizens, as well as business leaders, will only grow in scope and importance. Guyana is at the cusp of a transformation. Recent estimates confirm that offshore oil deposits may be as large as 1.6 billion recoverable barrels of oil, with additional resources yet to be quantified. Estimates continue to change, each time growing larger. And as these numbers grow, so too the expectations of the Guyanese people. I think we can all agree that legislation and regulations that protect Guyana's interests and promote transparent resource management at all levels are key components to success. The list of important legislation for the industry is vast and spans across the spectrum, from a Petroleum Act to regulations for a sovereign wealth fund, licenses and fees for the new industry, and occupational health and safety standards. Not just the government, but the people of Guyana have an incredible opportunity to define the country's future. That future starts with a carefully calculated strategic plan of action, formed from the collaboration of all stakeholders, that targets job creation, investment, and long-term revenue management. Overall, Guyana's economy has been doing well, and it is projected to continue on this path. The confirmed petroleum reserves guarantee Guyana the revenue to allow it to develop industries and infrastructure and to create a broad-based economy with true value added, which means jobs and prosperity if done right. It also means that Guyana will have the money to fund activities that will allow it to be even greener than it already is. It will be critical to think strategically now about how best to invest those revenues in ways that develop diverse industries, physical infrastructure and citizen security, renewables and energy independence, and quality education and health services. These are among the areas that will create significant job numbers, not local content in the offshore operation. To put it bluntly, revenues can be fleeting, whether coming in or going out. That is why the establishment of a comprehensive sovereign wealth fund is the cornerstone of, or if you will, the crown jewel in any new oil and gas regime. A sovereign wealth fund will provide Guyana with the opportunity to invest in its long-term future. Prudent management of incoming revenues will ensure that outgoing investments by the government in its people do not simply last for as long as oil is pumped out of the ground, but beyond that, through the creation of diverse new industries and projects. Such a sovereign wealth fund should be transparent, independent, inviolable, and nonpartisan. Certainly, Guyana is not and will not be alone in the road ahead. The United States, along with other partners, has and will continue to provide counsel and assistance in support of Guyana's efforts to build industries, not just petroleum, that are transparent, responsive, and accountable to all. Similarly, the participants of this conference, both domestic and international, are here because they recognize Guyana's incredible potential and want to be a part of Guyana's future. We commend and support your decision to invest your talents and voices in Guyana and hope that you will invite more to do the same. It will fall to all of you to continue to advance a vision and implement a plan. There is no amount of assistance that anyone can provide Guyana that can rival domestic political will, an informed private sector, and collaborative citizens. In closing, we encourage you to continue participating in Guyana and in Guyana's present and to keep building a better future.
I'd like to start by suggesting that in the oil and gas sector, we have a chance to do something that many of our other economic sectors have never really had an opportunity to deliberately do. And that is to do what is right for Guyana. While Guyana is no stranger to oil exploration, the commercial production of oil is something new for us. It hasn't yet begun, but unless this is all a big hoax, it certainly is about to happen. And it's important that we get it right. Most of our industries have evolved into what they are today without the benefit of this level of involvement and discussion taking place in the early stages. And I would therefore like to compliment the Guyana Oil and Gas Association on the contribution that it is making to building awareness and fostering the sharing of knowledge among a variety of stakeholders who need to know and understand each other's priorities as best as they can. And doing what is right for Guyana must be a priority for everyone involved. In the grand scheme of things, 20 to 30 years is little more than the blink of an eye. But for a developing country like Guyana, 20 to 30 years is sufficiently long-term for a total economic transformation to occur. And therefore, as we contemplate the advent of oil, it is important that we keep our focus on Guyana's long-term economic well-being. The transformation of Guyana's economy is imperative. Today, our economy is in transition. For many years, we were the beneficiaries of an illusionary economy. For a long time, we turned a blind eye to those gray areas of our economy that caused more money to be in circulation than we could readily explain. Many people benefited, but even more did not. During that period, we were unable to sufficiently stimulate and incentivize our productive sectors in order to broaden the base of our export earnings. And I would argue that it is difficult to incentivize businesses to invest in particular industries when you have a competing parallel economy enjoying benefits that no legitimate incentives program can match. What tax incentives can you offer to someone who is paying no taxes in the first place? No amount of exemptions could match the economic free-for-all that was taking place. And so now that we are no longer turning a blind eye to lawless business activities and are seeking to get businesses operating with increased conformity, there is some degree of discomfort and uncertainty. But we must transition to become an exporter of value-added goods and services. And this has to happen as a result of private enterprise. It is not the government that is going to invest in value-added production. It has to be the private sector. The government needs to facilitate the development of industries through policies that make those industries attractive and make those industries viable for private investors. And I wish to reiterate that our government will support key value-added sectors such as agro-processing, wood products, jewelry, ICT, and tourism. We will engage these sectors meaningfully on the challenges that they face in becoming competitive producers or service providers. And we will assist in reducing those challenges. The Ministry of Business is in the early stages of a project that will define an export promotion strategy that hinges on analyses of the individual sectors and their value chains. Our value-added sectors will get the support from our government that they need to grow and to develop. So our government is putting its money where its mouth is when it comes to value-added industries and the rebalancing of Guyana's economy. As we transition away from our reliance on just a few commodities, we will find ourselves going head to head with producers and service providers in other countries and having to compete against them for the markets we seek. This is where we will need to rely on innovativeness and modern technologies to improve quality and improve efficiencies and to exploit opportunities. It is important, therefore, that we nurture innovation and embrace new technologies. Our dependence on trade negotiations and preferential prices for the sale of our commodities in the past has allowed us to ignore the need to innovate and modernize without immediate consequences. And so we have some catching up to do in order to set us on that more sustainable economic pathway that has eluded us for so long. But we are going there. We are going there with policies. We are going there with laws and regulations. We are going there with the full support of a government that is committed to an economy that is driven by private enterprise. And therefore, we are going there with the private sector. And our government is ready and willing to engage the private sector on matters related to Guyana's economic well-being. In all of this, there is a genuine sentiment that the Guyanese people, present and future, need to be the beneficiaries of this resource that will be taken from within our exclusive economic zone and sold for cash, leaving behind depleted oil wells. I share that sentiment, and I can assure you that our government is strongly committed to outcomes that prioritize the interests of the Guyanese people. There is also the much talked about issue of local content. And I am certain that many Guyanese are anxiously anticipating that opportunities for employment and training and the provision of goods and services will be available to the local population. This is not an unreasonable expectation, but as we all know in business, nothing is handed to you on a platter. So we have to prepare ourselves for the opportunities from which we hope to benefit. Otherwise, we will not be in a position to do so. Many foreign firms are doing just that. Many of them have a great deal of experience and expertise and are interested in being involved. For us here in Guyana, this is a new industry, and we need to increase our understanding of the opportunities that it presents. One way of doing so is by partnering with firms that have the expertise and the knowledge that we lack. And I'm seeing this happening more and more. Government also has a role to play in ensuring that there is sufficient local content as the industry evolves, and that its partners in the industry provide some assurances that Guyanese will be involved and that deliberate efforts are being made to maximize that involvement. Oil must not become the new sugar. 40 or 50 years from now, when the last barrel has been pumped, we must not be suddenly wishing that we had not placed all our eggs in one basket. Food security is more important than oil, certainly in the long run, and Guyana needs to make the development of its agricultural sector an immediate priority. As I said before, we have to apply modern technologies and innovative solutions in order to become competitive food producers. Best practices are also critical. Fortunately, best practices can be contagious, and there are certainly a lot of best practices in the offshore oil industry that can transfer to some of our domestic industries. I'm also hoping that some of the attention that ExxonMobil's oil discovery is attracting can spill over to the other sectors that are important to our country's long-term well-being. We welcome the attention and we welcome investors and businesses to explore the entire range of business opportunities in Guyana. Oil is a means to an end. We love the fact that it has been discovered here and not 1,000 kilometers to the east or the west or the north of here. If we do what is right for Guyana, then oil will be good for Guyana. And oil will have a great future in Guyana.
I want to applaud Minister of Natural Resources, who was before Minister of Governance, Rafael Trotman, for taking an initiative while we were in Mexico in 2015 to start the conversation about open data, open information as regards our oil and gas potentials, and at the same time to seek out allies who would help us to develop the legal framework within which we could situate the production of oil and gas. And so I was delighted, having had the Department of the Ministry of Governance transferred to my portfolio, that one of the first initiatives that had been taken was to launch the Guyana EITI, where we felt that we needed not only to ensure that we have environmental impact assessment done and environmental protection, that the important thing for us was that our oil and gas industry should be characterized by transparency, by accountability, that we couldn't just extract our natural resources, our strategic natural resource, such as oil and gas, as well as timber resources, mineral resources, and not be accountable. And so it was a move in the right direction that the Guyana Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative was launched here in Guyana some weeks ago. I had said then that side by side with organizations such as the GEITI, that we would need to guarantee that the infrastructure, the political infrastructure of Guyana is as such that you could offer support and give strength to the initiative to have transparent extractive industries, and the organizations involved should have some sense of responsibility, that the resources are not simply a matter of developing legal relationships and contractual relationships, but that these resources are in fact national resources, and they must redound to the benefit of the people for whom they are the patrimony. And so I have said then at the launch of the GEITI that in my responsibility for governance, I'd like to see first and foremost a government structure where officials are accountable. Hence the early moves to have constitutional reform, to make sure that from the very top, you do not carry the baggage of executive excesses, that you shouldn't have political one-manship, and that your constitution ought to be able to guarantee all people that there will be no tendency towards, nor ought there be practices of authoritarianism. And so that's where I believe that we have to look at our oil and gas resources with regards to the nature of governance that we have in our country. We are very uncompromising as regards the avoidance of sleaze and malfeasance in public office. Too many stories have already been told in the world about the resource curse of countries that have been endowed richly with oil and gas resources, and their political and governance system bred a disease that deny ultimately the benefits of the resources to the people. And so while we can understand that there would be resistance by persons in public offices, including ministers and members of parliament, and including the president and the prime minister, there could be some level of resistance to the declaration of assets to avoid anyone in governance sneaking through the back door, side agreements and side benefits that result in unjust enrichment and perhaps disproportionate wealth. We have to push through with this agenda to ensure that there is public accountability, and the government ought to be able to set the example.